This meeting is really special to me because Susan Pyne, who works for me, she's a senior Access developer. I believe it's her first meeting with our group. She's on other groups, but it's her first meeting with this group. And the number two is because there's such a huge need to secure data. You know, with the HIPAA legislation, organizations are required to keep their data secure. That's confidential. And the two cases that come to mind, social security numbers and credit card numbers. But you've heard me say this before. I've walked into many places where they store this data, confidential information in Microsoft Access files, and they don't even bother with a master password. And so with Access, it's very easy to walk out the door with data. You copy the database to a USB file, and it's pretty straightforward from there to leave with the information. So tonight's presentation is critical if you're interested in securing the data organization. Now, every time I come across that situation where a customer has unsecured data, I, as the consultant, right away write them a letter, a formal letter saying, I hereby recommend that you migrate this data immediately to a secure environment. I recommend SQL Server. So I want to make sure I'm covered, right? In case there's a breach, they can't come back to me and say, well, you never told me, right? So I write them a formal letter, indicate what my recommendations are. And the easiest way to do this is by encrypting the data with SQL Server columns and then decrypting it in Microsoft Access. So it so happens that Susan has gone through this process several times already in the last few months. And I asked her to join us and talk about that. She has been with the organization now going, I believe, 3 years, right, Susan?
It's going on for 5 years, actually, this year.
5 years, yes. I knocked off 2 off your age. I forgot to do that with your years. So she's been with us now going 5 years, and she's impressed me so much because she, of all the people I've hired, her and Ben have really been one of the people that have learned the fastest. So I'm really happy with she's to have her. We think we're fortunate to have her. So Susan, without further ado, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you again to everybody for joining us this evening. And let me share my desktop. Okay, so you should all now be seeing my screen. Can I just have some confirmation that you've got that?
Yes.
Wonderful. So as Juan mentioned, the main topic is encryption of data in SQL Server. We're using column data encryption. There are several methods of encrypting your data, and I'll just go briefly over them. So firstly, what is encryption? Okay, so it's a process of transforming and altering your data using certificates and keys, which makes your data secure and very hard for people to understand. Okay, so basically once you've encrypted your data with these keys and certificates, without those, you cannot decrypt the data to actually read it. So the data is useless. It enhances the security to your database in case it gets into the wrong hands. And it is recommended, obviously, to implement encryption on data that is exposed over a public network, especially when it's confidential information such as a social security number or credit card information. Okay, this encryption of data can be used within SQL Server, on your connections, on your database, and we can also use it within stored procedures. Okay, so what types of encryption are there? Okay, so you've got keys to encrypt your data. We've got the asymmetric keys. This is where you have 2 types of keys. There's a public key and a private key. The public key is used to actually encrypt the data initially, but then you need to have the private key to read it. That will decrypt it and reproduce the data in its original format. So this gives you a good high level of security. And then we have the symmetric keys. These are obviously a lot easier to use. It's just one key and it's used to both encrypt and decrypt the data. And that is the method I'm going to be showing you today.
Presenting today.
Then the certificates. These are digital. I'll go through the hierarchy procedure for the keys and the certificates, but basically without your certificate, your symmetric key won't function. And we have transparent data encryption. This encrypts an entire database using symmetric keys and can be protected by other keys and certificates. One thing I'll say about the transparent data encryption. Okay, I'll come on to that, sorry, afterwards. Okay. Finally, we have the Transact SQL functions, which I will be using as well in the stored procedures. And this allows you to encrypt individual columns during an insert or an update in a function or in a stored procedure. So you'll be seeing the use of this later on in the demonstration. So let's go over the key-based encryption of SQL Server. So we start off with a service master key, and this is a key that is generated for each SQL Server instance once it is installed on the server or your computer. That is encrypted, used to encrypt passwords and credentials. So this is automatically created in your instance of SQL Server. There's nothing you need to do for that. It's automatically there. Then we have a database master key. And this is a symmetric key used to protect asymmetric keys in the database and certificates and private keys. So basically, it's like a hierarchy. One level won't function without the prior levels. So then we have the extensible key management. Now, this is was available in SQL Server 2000 from 2012, which I believe, and this allows you the ability to store and manage all your keys and certificates outside of SQL Server. I'm going to go on later and show you a hierarchy drawing, and so you'll understand how that works. And as I say, this is to manage encryption of key distribution. It's easier to recover your keys, and it gives you higher performance for hardware-based encryption. Okay, so as I say, what I'm going to go through now, we're going to go through the encryption hierarchy, and then I will move on to a demo where I will create keys and certificates. We'll go over schema changes and data encryption using stored procedures, and then using decryption and encryption in stored procedures to view your data in Access. Okay, so this is the hierarchy. And the top two are two keys that are automatically created in your systems. There's the Windows operating system that's created when you install Windows. And then we have the DMK, which is the instance, the database master key, which is created, the service key, which is created when you install SQL Server, which I'll discuss later. Now, this is the route that we're going to take today. I'll just go briefly. This is the EKM module, which is where I mentioned you'll store certificates and keys, but I don't actually have that installed on in my instance of SQL Server, so I won't be covering that today. We're going to go for creating a database master key. This is created and stored in the master database. That key cannot be encrypted because you need that key to run when you start up SQL Server. And if you have it encrypted, it ain't going to open. So that is just the one key that won't be encrypted, but it's stored in the master database. From there, then we'll go on to create a certificate, which is encrypted by the master key. And then within we have the symmetric, and the symmetric key is then encrypted by the certificate. And you'll see in the code that I'm going to show you in the demo how that works. The end of some references. Let me. Okay.
All right, so it seems like Susan's having, I'm sorry, Susan, it looks like you're having
so
sound
it's
issues.
not good. We need to. Okay.
Susan, can you hear me?
Let me. I can hear Juan. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks like you're having some network issues and some of the sound. Can you backtrack just a little bit the last few minutes and repeat that?
Okay, back to the presentation.
Yes. To the last few minutes that you were talking about. I think the last thing we saw was talking about is that you were creating certificates, and then once you create the certificates, you use that to create the key.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So we're going to create a certificate that is encrypted by the database master key. Then after the certificate comes the symmetric key, which is encrypted by the certificate. And then following that is when we go through and encrypt the data.
So the certificates are stored in the database, or where are they stored?
Okay, so the certificate and the symmetric key are stored within the database.
Okay.
One thing, the certificate, it is important you should make a backup of a copy of your certificate and your keys, because if you encrypt your data using the certificate and the key and you lose them, there is no way you're going to be able to decrypt the data.
Now, how do you store the certificate in a manner so that if somebody were to obtain the database files, they can't have the certificate now? Is there a protection for the certificate?
Yes. If they take the database and they get hold of the certificate and the symmetric key, they cannot activate those without the database master key. And the database master key will not work without the system, the service master key.
So it's like a chain. Once it's broken, you can't.
Yes.
You can't put it together again.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let's go on and I will show you the code. Okay, so this is where the code starts. So first of all, I'm going to show you the certificates I have in the master database. This is the service master key that is created on the date that you install SQL Server instance. So that is automatically created. The next step would be to create a master key. Again, using the master database. This is the script I have. And for this key, you need to enter a password. So I just put this, obviously you probably use a more secure password, but just for demonstration purposes, this will work. So if I just execute that now, I've created this password. If I now go show you the passwords, you'll now see that the master key has been created. Okay, now there is no expiry date on this master key, just the day that you've created it. So all you need to do there to create that is just create the master key, encryption by password, and then you put the password in. So that's the only way anyone's ever would ever be able to get to that key, is by knowing the password. Okay, so once we've done all that in the master database, we can then move to our database where we have the data that we want to encrypt. So the first step is to create the certificate. Now, when creating this is a self-signed certificate, and when you create it, there are only two fields that are required, and that is the subject and the certificate name. So I've put the name in and the subject. The expiry date, you don't need to put that, but this is automatically created with where the expiry date is 1 year from the creation date. So I always like to include the expiry date and add maybe 10 years or so in the future. But the funny thing with this is if the certificate expires, you can still use it. It doesn't become invalid because unlike SSL certificates, which once they expire, that's it. You can't use them. This one, it isn't read by the TDE, which is the transparent data encryption. So it really ignores the expiry date on self-created certificates. But as I say, I always like to create them and maybe do it 10 or 20 years in the future, because you never know if something's going to change within SQL Server or something happens. Just for security, I prefer to do that. So
no, you don't have to use your own. You don't have to create self-signed certificates. You could actually buy a certificate from a public authority and use that as well. But we're using self-signed certificates. It all depends on the requirements of your clients. A lot of clients may have a certificate that they want to use for your encryption. They store that somewhere other than the server, SQL Server itself. And so one advantage of having a certificate that's not on the server is that even if somebody were to walk away with your entire server, they couldn't decrypt the data because the certificate is not located there. So just keep in mind that you don't have to use self-signed certificates. You can use certificates in the public market. We're not going to go into that discussion. It's beyond the scope of the chat, but you can use that. Go ahead, Susan.
Correct. Those are the SSL certificates which I mentioned, and they do, when they expire, you can't use them afterwards. So you have to get those renewed. Okay, so let me run that code then to create the certificate. Just a moment. The master key needs to be in the data. Okay. Okay. Okay, so now I have my certificate. And if I go here now to security, you will see under certificates. Let me refresh. There we are. We can see that the certificate is there. The next step is the symmetric key. And again here, you just need to give a name, the algorithm, which I am for this purpose using AES 128. I believe there are other algorithms that you can use. I'm just sticking with this one for today. And of course, you have to name the certificate that you're going to use that will encrypt this key. So that is the certificate that I've used above. I'll just run that code now. Okay. So that's the certificate and the key created. So if I go here now I need to refresh this. And there we are. We can see the key and the certificate are created within the database. Okay, so now my next step is the schema changes. I'm going to start off, I'm going to add a column to the table, which is a binary max. And that is what the key that is the field that is going to hold the encrypted social security number. I'll just run that code.
Does it have to be binary max, or can you specify length?
I've always used this. I've never tried it with a length, but
Okay.
I would use a max because it is quite a big field that they put in.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so now that we have the field created, if we go now to let's close this one. Go now to the table, and I've done it on this table. Go to the columns. You see there now I have my social security number field there. So what I want to do now is take all the values from the social security number, encrypt them, and put them into this field. So that is what this bit of text is going to do. So what it's actually going to do, first of all, it's going to open the symmetric key by decrypting it with the certificate 1. Then it's going to run this script here. And this is where we're using the SQL Server function encrypt by key. So we're stating here we're going to encrypt this data by a key and using the symmetric key. So we're naming the key there. So this is the field that we're encrypting, and this is the key, the field that it's going into. And then when you've run that, it is important that you close the symmetric key once you've finished. I shall run that now. And we have 100 records. So let me show you now how that looks. And there we are. I'll bring this, as you see, one. Okay, so this is the social security number that it was originally, and this is how the data looks now when it's encrypted.
So that's what Access would see if you didn't use a certificate to decrypt it. She's going to show you how to do that soon, but if you didn't use a certificate and you open that table in Access, you'll see that Gerberish on the encrypted social security number.
You don't actually see that. I'm going to show you what you'd actually see. Let me get to this. Okay, let me refresh the link for that table. Now that we've made the changes. That one it is. Did it do it? Did it do it? So done. Okay. Let's find that table. There you are. And that's what you actually see for the encrypted key. OLE okay. Object. Okay. Let's go to the next step. Okay, so then to actually read the data, once it's been encrypted, you're going to use this key, decrypt again with the certificate, and this time we're going to use the function decrypt by key and the field that we want to decrypt. But we don't, in this case, we don't need to mention the certificate. We just want to decrypt it by key, and it knows then which key to use. So if I go select this now, did I not click? Ah, you see that error? That is what happens when you don't open the key beforehand. Let me just select all that again now, this time with the open key, and execute. And here we are. This is the social security number as it originally was. The data encrypted, and once it's decrypted, it's coming back to you at its original format. Okay, so that's all well and good. You've now got that in SQL Server. It's decrypted. So once you're happy and you've got that, you can go ahead, you can drop your column social security number. If you no longer want, obviously you don't want, the idea is to encrypt it, so you don't want to have that there, you can go ahead and drop that column.
Susan, can you go back to Access and put that table in design view? We want to see what Access recognized. I believe George suggested a blob. I think that's what it is.
OLE object.
OLE object, okay. So it's OLE, not blob. All right. Go ahead, keep going.
Okay. Okay, so now we've got that data there, it's all encrypted. How are we going to get that data here into Access to allow us to read and update the client information? So let me go back here and we'll now go on to creating some stored procedures. So first of all, we've encrypted the records that are there, but then if you're going to edit, update, or add new clients, you need to be able to encrypt the data automatically as it's stored into SQL Server. So here I've created a stored procedure to do that. And with this stored procedure, I'm going to be sending in the participant ID, which is the key. Gosh, the words come from my head. Okay, it's the ID of for the table. Primary key, that's it, sorry. And then the social security number will be sending in as an varchar 255. In this instance, I'm using with execute as owner. And what that does is allows the users to read the symmetric key and the certificate. If they don't have access and permissions to read those, they won't be able to run the stored procedure. So I just include that in, and then that allows your users to actually read and update the data. Then we're running the code. What we want to do, we want to update the table and set this encrypted social security number using the parameter that we're sending in, the social security number. So it's exactly the same code as I did when I was encrypting all of the social security numbers at the beginning. This time we're going to be sending in a parameter. And obviously where the participant ID is equal to the participant ID that we're sending in. And at the end, closing the symmetric key. So I'm just going to create that one.
So that stored procedure assumes that the social security number is in the database. And yes, you're just going to decrypt it. So what happens if I'm an employee? I got the screen here. If I work in human resources and I'm adding a new employee to the company in Access, what would be the procedure to add that social security number on a new record?
Okay, I have some code in Access that's going to, when they enter it, it will run this stored procedure to save the data.
Okay.
Okay.
And then it deletes the social security number after it's been encrypted.
The social security number is not getting stored. It's just passing the value through as a variable, a parameter.
Okay. All right,
just passing it through as a parameter, encrypting it, storing the encrypted, and that's it. So there's no saving of the actual number in the database.
Okay.
Okay. Create that. Okay, so we've got that change. The next one I have is to decrypt it, because obviously you want to be able to view the data. In this case, I want to show certain people only to see the last 4 digits of the social security number. So here what I've done is it's just a select statement, select the fields that I want in the query, and I'm using this row here, this code, and what it's doing is just putting the X's at the beginning of the social security number, decrypting, but just returning me the last 4 digits so that they won't see all of the information. Hit that one, and you'll see that better once we're forgetting that end. Okay. And then finally, I'm just creating another one, another store procedure that will return the full social security number. But in that case, all I am doing is including the participant ID. So if somebody runs that, they're going to get a list of social security numbers, but they only have the ID of the person who it belongs to.
So the idea being here is, so you know, when I design these systems with clients, I always tell them that does everybody need to see the full social security number? I mean, right? Why does Joe in the warehouse need to see the full social security number, right? He's doing warehouse functions. So if anybody needs to see social security number, can they go by? Then the next question is, okay, they need to see social security, can they survive with just the last 4 digits? Because a lot of times you'll have companies that when you call, they say, what's your name, what's your date of birth, and what's the last 4 numbers of your social, as to validate who you are. And then the last level of security, which is the most exposure, is you see the full social security number. So that's why she designed it that way.
Correct. Okay. So let me take you now back to Access, and we'll see how this is working in Access. Okay, so this is my old form. Now I have a new one that I've created. Here we go. What is this? Okay, let me just do some need to refresh anything there because it's only the procedures don't do this. Let's put it in design view. Query client. Let's see, make sure this is working. You worked for me earlier.
Well, does it need a social security number or a parameter?
No, this is the decrypting.
Oh, okay.
Is my connection? What has happened?
So it's looks like it's not recognizing the DBO. Go ahead and copy that statement and go to SQL Server, execute it in SQL Server Management Studio to see if it works there. So that's your first troubleshooting step, right? If it doesn't work in SQL Server, it's never going to work in Access. So I always encourage people to come in here, create a new query, paste the code, and run it here to see if it works. And it doesn't work. So get rid of the DBO dot in the calling the. No, that should work. No, okay.
Okay, let's see the.
Look at the store procedure and under programmability, and look and see who the owner of the store procedure is. So it looks like it may not be DBO. You may need to refresh store procedures. It is DBO. Okay, that maybe it wasn't.
DBO.
Okay. And it's the right database, right? Sample
Yeah.
DB.
Sample DB.
Okay.
Execute DBO dot
All right, so maybe you should have permission because you created a stored procedure.
I created it. I've done this millions of times, and it's wow.
Can you hover over it? See what it says when you hover over it? There's a squiggly line there. What does it say?
To IntelliSense, it's saying it doesn't. Saying it doesn't exist, but I created it. Let's just check that I am in the sample database. Yeah.
So
one.
Greg and Ron are saying right-click on the store USP and execute it right there from the tree. So right-click on it and then execute. Right-click, execute store procedure. It's the one above that. You select it.
I click on the rock one. That's the one I clicked on, execute to stop procedure.
Yeah, see that. All right, so let's go into the properties of the store procedure and just give yourself rights to it again. Security rights to execute it, although you should have had it already. In the permissions. And then
I should have it because
let's go back to the store procedure.
it.
I think Greg's got a good idea. Why don't you go back to the store procedure and execute the store procedure, not as store procedure, but as if you were passing it along. So go back to the store procedure code. Try running that code, not by right now. You're creating the store procedure.
Yeah.
Don't create it, but rather just run it. There you go. No. No, you want to do it after not with the begin. There you go, right there, all the way to the. There you go. Execute that. Okay, so that works. That's good. Right. So with owner means that the person who's executing the store procedure does not have to be the owner of the database in order to run it.
Correct. And let me just try removing that.
You can try by, yeah. It wouldn't be a demo unless it went bad.
Yeah, it worked now.
Although, with DB owner didn't like it for some reason.
Yeah. So
all right,
let me just modify them all.
Thanks, Greg, for the heads up there. But I mean, my understanding of that option is that, obviously you can, the one nice thing about store procedures is you can extract that as a security layer, right? In other words, a user may not have access to the table in question, employees, but if you create a store procedure and provide them with execution rights to that store procedure, then they can read, right? The store procedure returns these records from the table. They can do that. And so the nice thing about that is that you don't have to give them rights to the table. You just got to give them rights to the store procedure that can continue your business logic. All right, so that's working now. Right. So I see the access with the 4 digits.
Yeah, so there we are with the social security number.
Okay, so the only way for people to see data is through the store procedure pass-through query.
Correct.
That's the only way for they can see it. There's no way to not use a store pass-through query in order for them to see the data.
Yeah. So in this case, I have 3 pass-through queries. As you saw, the 3 store procedures are created. One that takes new data, encrypts it, and saves it into SQL Server. Another one that just returns the 4 digits, and one that returns the full social security number.
So what
And the
happens if you
way
need to edit the data?
okay, so what I have here is just double click on the social security number. Let me get that. Oh, don't you just love it when this happens?
It does. Yeah, it happens to everybody. It happens to me all the time. Don't worry about it.
Okay, so
So look, while you're working on that, I want to make a comment. If you're using stored procedures, right? If you're using a pass-through query source of your form, then you cannot edit the data in that form, right? You need to be used either unbound or, I mean, it's bound to the query, but then you need to somehow save changes to another medium. Let's use code to save the changes and update the database. Yeah, we're going to get all this code and the sample database to everybody who attended here today. So they'll probably be on the Access User Group website. So if you have a continuous form, right? If you have a continuous form, you got to watch out for that using a pass-through query.
Can't you use a link query with the if you do on the access side, if you have a primary key, you can create an index.
Well, you need a mechanism that decrypts, right? And so the only way you can decrypt it is by using the SQL Server functions. Access doesn't decrypt for you.
No, I mean if you link the view with the 4-digit numbers, then you even could create an index in Access. So then you could edit the data beside the social security number.
All right, so that's a good point, right? So let's talk about that example. You create the view, and the view has code that will decrypt that column, just like Susan used in the procedure. So obviously a view needs to have an index in order to be editable in Access. But because you have that calculated column there, I'm not sure if it'll let you modify any of the other columns in that view. So one of the things I've done in the past with clients is I created a separate table with the only social security number. And then when I create that view to decrypt the social security number, you got the main table for employees, and you have the link adjoined to the other table, along with the decrypt function, to show the 4 digits of the social security number. Now, sometimes that doesn't work, right? Access will say, SQL Server will give an error to Access saying, I don't know which table you want me to edit because there's 2 tables in this query, in this view. And so that's when you may need to create triggers, update triggers, insert triggers, delete triggers. And now it's getting into the weeds because now you have all these triggers on a table. And I just hate triggers because what's the number one problem with triggers? They're not easy to find. You may not get them through. So once you start creating triggers, it's not, sometimes the trigger is a problem and they're hard to decode and get to it.
okay, so what I actually did on this form one, let me put it into design view. I have a subform that actually has the other information of the clients. So my main form is using the pass-through query, the query client, which just has the ID and it's showing the social security number in just the last 4 digits. And then the subform is using the actual table. So that within that form you can update and change the information of the clients. However, to change the social security number, what you would do here is double click and it will open this pop-up net form and you now see the full number. So if I go here now and I change this number and click save, and let's see what
and then close. You have to close it.
You know what? I think this is opening the wrong form for me. Let me just check something.
So one of the things that you might be tempted to do is I'm gonna put code in the double click event of social security number. If you're not authorized, you don't get to see the social security number, which I don't agree with. You want to put you want to use SQL Server as a security model, right? And that is you create a group in the SQL Server called SSN authorized users, whatever you want to call it, and you grant them access to the table to be able to see that social security number and work with that record. And even take that a step further, and that's when you use SQL Azure, right? SQL Azure, you would create SQL Server security groups. But you can take that a step further, and when it's a local SQL Server at a corporation, and you can use a Windows directory group that gets validated. And I love Windows directory groups as my security model because that way the IT administrators don't have to go into my SQL Server, add people, remove people when they're ready to leave the company, but rather just go into their AD, add the corresponding person to the group, and that group has validate rights to the social security field in that table.
Okay, now I must apologize because I altered my code today and it hasn't saved the changes. So when you click save, I'm executing this stop procedure. And what I'd actually altered my code to was to change the pass-through query on the change the pass-through query to pass in the variables of the client ID and the social security number. And I think I have a version. And obviously it's not saved that, so that's why that didn't work. But that is the idea behind it, so that then this pass-through query.
So why did you have to change the pass-through query in your code? What were you changing?
Because this is the encryption. So what it would do is going to change the query to have the participant ID and the social security number, and pass
Well, I can
those
walk
through.
you through that if you like. I can walk you through that real quick.
Okay.
I'll bring up the code.
Okay, so after you see, I've got the dim query definition, and it's just taking out.
Yeah. So after, well, you got the change to there. QDF.SQL equal str SQL. So
it is. It's there.
Yeah, it is there.
But it is setting it, and it's running it.
Yes.
That is on the form social security. Okay, let's put a breakpoint there and see what's happening. So we'll double click here. 8. I click save. Comes there.
Debug. Click on debug.
I know I know what it is now. Let's go design view.
Well, while Susan's fixing that, I just want to talk to you guys about a story I heard from Armin Stein. He's an Access MVP in George's side of the country, Seattle. And we're at a conference, and Armin was talking about security models for with domain groups. And he got into this huge argument with the CIO because he was telling him that when you have security groups in your domain, that's less secure than you're using SQL Server groups. And I've talked about this point in the past, but in case you missed it, that was Armin's point. He has a good point because the last thing you want to do is have somebody open Excel, and because they have rights to your SQL Server table, open Excel query your database, fill up a spreadsheet, then walk out the door with their laptop, and then their laptop gets stolen. How many times you heard that in the news? Right. So you gotta be careful with your security schema to avoid those kind of situations. That's why SQL Server security is better, because it gives you a more tighter ring of security. And in SQL Server parlance, it's called a security surface is smaller, right? That's what they call it when you see that, when you hear that line. So you just gotta think through all those. So it looks like now it's working, right?
Correct.
Okay, wonderful.
So just try one more there.
Change it to all 9s.
There we go.
And then, okay, great. Good, lovely, like you say.
So that was it.
So what happens if it's I go back to the same question. What happens if it's a continuous form? How would you design that?
A continuous form, if it's a continuous form, I've just been showing the social security number like this. Basically, wherever possible, we've used this. We use just show the last 4 digits. I only show the full social security number when they need to add or update, where they're entering the data. And obviously anywhere else where it's specifically needed. But on a continuous form, how would I do that? How would I handle? I think we'd have to be.
You could base it on the view. And
yes.
the view is decrypting that column.
Yeah. Yeah, because you just use the same view, the one that I had for social.
So Greg from Cambodia is saying that he uses a view. He uses a continuous form for selection of every other rows and editing in the header. So it's the same concept you have there. All right. Does do you have anything else, Susan, before we go to the question and answers?
No, that's all.
Wonderful.
Okay. So yeah, this is a view where you've got all the data and the decrypted social security number, so you could just use that in a continuous form. You would have to, if you want to edit your social security number within a continuous form, it's a bit more tricky. You'd have to do it where it's probably again opening up that pop-up window.
Yeah, that's how I do it too. All right. So let's open the mics here. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Question and answer. So I see some comments here. All right. One question: use of binary max for the encrypted for those who does this only uses much basis needs. Well, I mean, is there any storage penalty for using binary? You know what? SQL Server is so great at storing data in such a compressed high ratio. I wouldn't be concerned, Greg, about using the max parameter of our binary. But that's a good question. All right. Hope anybody else has a question? You don't have to type it. If you want, you can open your mic and. All right, so what did you guys think about tonight's presentation? Are you going to be able to use this with your clients or your projects? Are you thinking about tomorrow, start playing with it? All right, we got a question from Ron. How do you open the key via a view? So go ahead and create a view, Susan, with that decrypt key view, function so they can see how that works.
Okay, I would. I'll just copy and paste it from.
So the way I would do it is I create a function that decrypts a column, and then I reference the function to view. Right. So I don't know if that's what you were thinking about doing. Okay. So that's how you do it, right? So,
I do. Yes, I have. see, I don't know if I've got it on this one. I did do it for another example. No, it's not on here. I do have a function that would decrypt it and use it in a view, but we did find that was really slow, especially if you've got a view with a large number of records.
All right, so Greg had a follow-up question, limitation Express. You know, a lot of our clients use Express. And I tell you, over the years, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've only had to migrate 2 clients from Express to SQL Server full-blown version. So there's not so much the space, but rather the fact that they were growing so fast. They had lots of users in the organization, and SQL Express has limitations CPU and storage, mostly CPU and memory. So he wanted to avoid those constraints in the purchase of license of SQL Server. But I think the fact that Access has a 2 GB limit and then SQL Server Express has 11 GB, a lot of companies just never get to that point. I mean, almost never they reach that point of saturating the storage. All right, so going back to my question, you guys are going to be able to use this. You're thinking about using this in your own project soon. Have you ever been asked to create a database with sensitive information, with Social Security, credit cards? I see that Greg says definitely. Anybody else thinking about using this encryption method? It's pretty straightforward. Of course, when somebody shows it to you, it's pretty straightforward. So let's wrap up all these code snippets and SQL Server that you have, Susan, into a text file, and make sure you provide that to Alex when he uploads your presentation, right?
I will, and I will include the code for the function as well.
Okay. Now keep in mind, guys, it's important to encrypt this information because you don't want your client in the news, right? And so you want to keep your client out of the news. And so every time I come across any kind of sensitive medical records, credit card information, Social Security numbers, and I get a pushback from a client, I always say, well, I'm trying to keep you out of the news. Because the last thing you want to do is have somebody steal this data and then becomes a data breach. The other thing about this, I have an E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance. And so it covers in case there's an issue with my code or the code my employees generate. So that's why I do that letter, because that way you can't come back and try to file a claim against my E&O saying, oh, because IT Impact didn't do this, I had a data breach. It says, no, we told you that you had to move that to SQL Server. Carl, you said, and the Access database? I need more context for your question. Thanks, Dan, for your comment.
I just mean not only the SQL Server code, but also the Access database, a sample.
Oh, yes. So we're going to provide you with the Access database sample and the SQL Server code. Thank you, Carl, for reminding us.
No, I'm Klaus. I'm not Carl.
Oh, Klaus, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, if you're consulting, Mario, when you're consulting, you just gotta have E&O. And so there's that's insurance. There's another insurance. I'm trying to remember what I have. You've got liability insurance for the business, and then there's workman's comp insurance, and oh my gosh, you spend so much money on insurance. And then the other thing is sometimes I'm working with a large organization, and they'll say, well, your E&O needs to have $5 million coverage. I'm like, what? I have $1 million coverage on my E&O. So now I got to go back to my insurance provider. Say, well, how much more is this $5 million stuff going to cost me? So it may go from $600 to $2,200. Now, most of that time it's worth it because I'm working on a project that's around $25,000. Yeah, it's going to pay for itself. And then once I finish the project and there's no more follow-up work, I'll just call back the insurance company and reduce it back to the $1 million coverage, if I remember. So, it's not that expensive. E&O is not expensive. If you're a consultant, I know George is a consultant. If you have other consultants in the audience, I know Dan Moorhead. Dan, do you have E&O insurance? I don't know if Dan's still here or not, but I know Dan's a consultant. Okay, not currently. All right. I thought you were consulting, Dan. All right. So okay, consulting, yes, but you don't have insurance. Okay, all right. And I don't publicize the fact with my clients. I have the E&O. I don't walk in there and say, oh, by the way, if I mess up, you can file a claim against my insurance, right? I don't publicize that fact, and I try to keep the insurance company out of it. And so I try to resolve those issues. Maybe I credit their account if I make a really egregious mistake, and I'll credit their account or give them some free hours. And I've yet to have a claim against my E&O, so that's good. We lost a good man in Grover Park, George, when he stopped being a consultant. All right, so thank you so much, Susan. I think great job. Of course, on you did a great job.
I have, this is the code for the function. I've got it in there. Okay, so that's the code for the function. I was just quickly doing a get some more data and from TBL. Oh, wrong keyboard.
I think you're missing a bracket around Social Security. You know, I'm surprised we didn't get more people to come in today for something that's critical as encryption. Honestly, I was expecting a lot more. I appreciate everybody turned out, but I was hoping there'd be a lot more. You're missing a bracket around Social Security field, by the way.
Yes.
Sometimes when you add a function like Susan did, you get that squiggly line. And it's because the IntelliSense hasn't cached it yet. Sorry, so you want to refresh your IntelliSense. Dan, this is our first time using Teams, and honestly, it's got some nice things, but we're having problems with it. All right, so now that you create the view,
so
she's
created
gonna.
The view.
Okay.
I could just execute the view, shouldn't I?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do. I know. If I could type, it would help.
Oh, you're having that same problem before.
Having that same problem again. I know why. Did I put that with schema binding? I've got the executor zone.
You have to alter the function now.
Yep.
George, I had this vision of you on the beach somewhere in the Caribbean. Instead, you're here with us. I appreciate you coming. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad you're here, but I know you're retired, and sometimes when I'm retired, I think of myself somewhere in the beach, having a cocktail. But thanks for showing up. We know you always show up for us. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Susan. That worked great. Splendid. Now, if you notice, her view is composed of a function. So you cannot edit the data for that column, right? So keep in mind, if you want to create a view that's editable, you may need to do triggers. All right, well, this has been for us a couple housekeeping items. We will not have a meeting in March because George and I will be at the MVP Summit next month at Microsoft. One of the things that I look forward to on the 12th. We're all going to be in Seattle, and Microsoft is going to wine us and dine us and treat us very well. I remember one year they gave us a discounted service, and the year they gave us a free GoPro camera. Who knows what they're going to give us this year? We're always looking for that. And then, yeah, if you have any questions you'd like to share with the Access team, please provide it. I mean, I'm a product ambassador, and so I always like to bring They always want feedback, right? These guys spend their days working on features and bugs, and they're hungry for feedback from the field. So by all means, you can reach out to me. If you don't have my email, it's jsoto@itimpact.com. And send me your questions, and I'll forward them. So I'll forward them to the Access team if I don't know the answer. So when we come back from break, we're coming back in April. Don't have a session for you guys planned yet for April, but we definitely want to do some more deep dives with Access and SQL Server. And maybe we'll extend this chat with the triggers, right? So we do have, by the way, it works fine with Azure if you have the right permissions, but we have not tried. Have you tried it, Susan, with Azure? Encrypting data,
No, I
creating
haven't.
certificates. Yeah, I can't tell you for sure if it works for Azure or not. We have never tried it, so that's something maybe we'll try for February. See if we can do that. So when you get a chance, Susan, I'd like to get an answer to that because we are doing more and more work in Azure. It'd be nice to know if all this stuff would work in Azure.
I will test it.
Okay. So Susan just wrote a blog post. If you're not on our blog post list, you missed out on a great blog post. Susan, if you want to bring it up, her blog post was using SSI packages with Access. So go to accessexperts.com/blog, and there you find Susan's latest blog post. So please read that. And we might have her come back later on this year to talk about SSI packages and Access. And the whole thing came about because we have a client that uses millions of records. Dan, well, I know, Dan, I don't know how you do it, but you're always quick on the gun. So Dan beat you to the URL, so he listed it there. So if you have, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to the blog. Go ahead, Susan.
It's all right. I was just saying it's taking a while to open.
Yeah, Dan already posted a link there in the comments, but bring it up anyway.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Dan.
So, you know what, we come back in April, I'm also going to have feedback from the MVP Summit. So make sure you put that in the calendar. Be sure you're here for the April because I'm going to have some news from the latest MVP conference which I can share. And last but not least, I'm working on a podcast. It's called the Microsoft Access Podcast. That's coming soon. So you're going to be hearing a lot about that. I've already recorded my first episode. And looking forward to you guys listening to the podcast and giving me some feedback on that. It's going to be a little different. It's not going to be about technology. It's going to be more along the lines of business and how wonderful Access can be with automation and more business oriented, right? Because there's lots of technical blog posts and lots of technical videos, but I felt there was a real need to make the case for accessing the enterprise. And that's what the podcast is going to focus on. So looking forward to sharing that with you guys soon, coming soon in the end of February here, at least the first episode. I would have had it done by tonight, but I'm such a stickler for how I sound on these things. So I've been recording over and over again. I actually went out there. Let me show you my setup. I know you guys are talking about to leave, but let me just show you my setup here. Got this podcast microphone here in Shield. This is where I record my podcast. So spend a few dollars on that, little baby. Of course, my wife will start shaking her head every time I bring this stuff home. All right. Well, this has been Juan and Susan live from Chicago. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you here in April.